All right, everybody, welcome to Trail Tales Coach Talk Edition with Shawn and Alex. We have special guest David Waters. Dave, thanks for joining us this evening.
Of course, man. Absolutely. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And Alex, good to see you as well.
You too, Shawn. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so this edition of Coach Talk, I decided to do an article about creatine phosphate supplementation. So I'm going to do a screen share here with you guys real quick, and we'll do a brief synopsis of the article. And the article is available at trailtalesarp.com. You can find Alex's previous article there. Can you guys see the screen okay now?
Yeah.
All right,
Sure
so here's
can.
the website. So creatine phosphate supplementation. The real gist of the article, guys, is the theory or the research that shows now that HIIT training or high intensity interval training has been shown to actually cause the same adaptations that were once only thought possible from long distance exercise. There's a study from 2008, so it's not that old, but it's a Canadian study from McMaster University, and they did find that the gains from high intensity training will cause the same physiological changes as long distance exercise. In their article, it's from Gibala and McGee, and it's metabolic adaptations to short-term high intensity interval training. A little pain for a lot of gain. So where does creatine fit into this? Well, we have three engines that fuel us, right? So we all know about fat as a fuel. We know about carbohydrates as a fuel, but the very first engine that we have is the phosphagen. And what that does is phosphagen helps us, or phosphate helps us create ATP, and that's the basis of all of our energy, especially with muscular contraction. So in order to maximize high intensity interval training to get these endurance physiological benefits, the idea is to add creatine phosphate supplementation to our dietary intake to allow us to maximize our ability to perform high intensity interval training, thereby maximizing our endurance at the end of the day, right? It's kind of the means to an end here. And when you're taking creatine phosphate, in the beginning of the article, I kind of talk a little bit about the role of phosphate in muscular contraction. We're getting down to the nitty gritty, to like the very basic level of the muscle itself and how it contracts. And the basic functional unit of a muscle, real quick, not to get too much into it, it's called a sarcomere. And it involves two types of proteins, well, actually more than that, but the two main proteins are myosin and actin. And what happens is myosin is a thicker filament, and it has a head, almost looks like a golf club, that attaches to a receptor site on the actin, and then the head of the myosin will cause a power stroke, and it pulls in almost like a hammer, and it draws the actin filaments in, and that's actually the smallest level of your muscle where it's contracting. You have, you know, umpteen numbers of these things that make whole muscles. So that grabbing that myosin head, that power stroke, all relies on ATP. And you need the ATP for two things. You need it to cause the power stroke, but then you have the myosin that's attached to the actin, and it needs to release from that. You also need ATP to cause the release. So it's to cause the muscle contraction, but also to allow it to release, to repeat that contraction over again. And when we're taking creatine phosphate, the theory behind it is that you're increasing the amount of phosphate in the cellular environment, and it allows you to have a higher turnover rate of creating ATP, which would, in theory, allow your muscles to work faster and work harder, right? So if you're able to work harder and work more efficiently during your HIIT training, you should, by theory, increase the physiological adaptations that you're going to get. You're going to maximize the benefit, right? So that's kind of the whole theory behind the article here. So there was another example here that I did at the very beginning, and it was for a study, and they're talking about in untrained and recreationally active individuals, short-term HIIT training is a potent stimulus to induce physiological remodeling similar to traditional endurance training, despite a markedly lower total exercise volume and training time commitment. So you're getting really good bang for your buck here. And the example here that they give us is as little as 6 sessions of all-out HIIT training over 14 days, so 2 weeks, for 15 minutes of intense cycle exercise with a total training commitment of 2.5 hours over 2 weeks is sufficient to enhance the exercise capacity and improve skeletal muscle oxidative capacity. So you're looking at a 2-week training block of 2.5 hours of exercise, and you're actually going to be benefiting with your muscle oxidative capacity, which, as we know, helps us with our endurance performance, right? With our long-term, long, slow, steady state stuff. So this is great for guys like me that are on a time crunch and I need to get the best bang for my buck. However, HIIT training can be very intense and very difficult. So there are some drawbacks that I would say, I don't know if you'd agree, Alex, is sometimes you need more recovery time after doing kind of explosive type training intervals or whatever they might be. And if you don't give yourself enough recovery time, you may be more susceptible to injuries. What would you think about that, Alex?
I'd agree. The whole recovery period that your body's able to have following your intense exercises is really where you're going to make the adaptations. It's very hard on the body, and it can lead to overtraining if you're just going back to back with interval days. That's why it's nice to have an intensity one day, recovery the next day, intensity, recovery, and just stressing your body that way.
Yeah.
And I think there's huge benefit to the big long volume training days, but those high intensity days can help work on your speed turnover and some other adaptations too.
Absolutely. I think in theory you could train for a distance event with this type of training, with this high intensity interval training. But I do think that, we can't discount the long steady state runs with low intensity, because there's that mental aspect too. If you're used to running short, intense things, once you get into that long run and then you're running for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, there's that mental aspect. And if you haven't trained your mind to kind of deal with that whole level of things, you might be in for some failure, right? So it's important to kind of hit every aspect. But if you want to get some quick gains, if you're willing to put in some work in a short period of time, I think this is definitely an interesting avenue to explore.
Right. And I'm sure Dave can touch on some of the muscular breakdown that those long 2, 3, 4, 5 hour runs have compared to your 15-minute, 30-minute intensity bout.
Yeah.
So that could be guys looking to do marathons or ultra marathons.
Yeah.
There might be more muscular breakdown, but
yeah, because Dave, you just came off your first 50 miler, and it was pretty difficult. And if anybody's interested in that, you can go to Plant Powered Runner YouTube channel, and we did a podcast episode on it a few shows back on Trail Tales ARP. So Dave, how are you feeling now, a couple weeks out after your run?
I'm feeling pretty good. Obviously, I'm not fully recovered. It takes a while. The heart rate is still shows itself. I'm still probably about a good 5 beats higher than I'd like to be. I feel good. Body feels really, really good. Like there's no muscle aches or pains, I feel pretty rock solid, but it's the internals
Yeah.
that are still not there. So yeah, the muscle fatigue when you're going longer, you definitely feel it. Like there's no doubt. Especially with all the elevation gain and stuff like that I experienced. 12 hours on your, just think about it, just 12 hours on your feet alone, right? That's crazy. But when you start going up the elevation that I went up, it really takes a toll. So running those longer runs is definitely going to help build the muscle and condition yourself, just not physically, but mentally. Because that's a challenge just to go that kind of distance. Because
Yeah.
Where does your mind go after 12 hours, right?
Yeah, exactly. So to get back to creatine, obviously creatine phosphate is not going to help with those long runs, Dave, because it's obviously designed to kind of help you with a short explosive burst, right? So if you're doing, for example, like you were doing 80-20 training, 80% long, slow, steady state runs, and then you're doing 20%, you're doing some interval and track work, I would be interested to see, if you were to try to supplement with creatine for a while, what your track work looked like, because that could help maximize your track work, right, and reap better benefits from there. So here's what I'm going to do. They say, and Alex, we talked about this before Dave was able to join us in the room here, is that I've always gone by the saying that theory without practice is empty, and practice without theory is blind. So I've kind of written this article, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to enter the creatine experiment. And we've kind of been talking about this. So I've got here my tub of creatine that I just purchased. It's unopened. It contains creatine monohydrate, but it also has creatine phosphate, and it's got like 5,010 milligrams of that. So what the plan is I'm kind of going to go by the protocol of the loading phase that we wrote in the article. So I'll probably do 5 days of loading, 20 milligrams of creatine phosphate a day, and I'll break that up into 4 doses of 5 milligrams throughout the day. And then once I'm all loaded up, I'll go do my training. But before I load up on my creatine, the idea is to head out and do 400-meter intervals. I'd like to do the track, but the snow's fallen, so I don't know if I'm going to get to do the track. But I just went out for a run before we met up tonight with my dog, and I kind of plotted out 400 meters in front of my house. So if I go from the light pole, run around the block back to the light pole, it's just over 400 meters. So I might use that distance for my running, because the sidewalks are usually plowed or the roads are usually plowed. But the idea is to do some 400-meter intervals without creatine. And I know that, with the type of training, one of the challenges I thought was, well, if I'm doing these intervals, I'm going to be improving anyways without the creatine, because I'm getting that training under my belt. So I think that the way I'm going to design it is I'm going to do 400-meter intervals. I'm going to do about 10 of them. So I'll do 4 kilometers total with 2 minutes rest in between each interval. I'll do that maybe 2 or 3 times within a week. And then I'll just see what my level of improvement is throughout that week, if any. And I'll measure that by a percentage. Then I'll take that the next week, I'll take it as a rest week, or I'll just do my regular running. And during that time, I'll be loading with the creatine. And then on week 3, I'll go back out there, run the same exact area with the creatine under my belt, and then see the level of improvement I'd have over the course of 3 sessions, likely, right? I'll try to recreate what I did the previous session out there. And then it would be interesting just to look at the numbers and see what the percentages of improvement are throughout those 2 weeks. And I think that's a good way to kind of make up for any improvements I may have gained through the training without the creatine, right? Because it's not like I can just say, okay, I did this, now I didn't get any benefit from that, and then go into the creatine, because it's almost like I'm getting a double benefit theoretically with the creatine and the previous training. So I think if we look at the percentage of increase is probably a good way to do it. Alex, you mentioned kind of maybe doing a placebo, like a kind of like a double blind where somebody prepares it for me, and I don't know if I'm taking the actual creatine phosphate or just the placebo, right?
Right, because some studies they'll have one group with the placebo and one group with the drug. But the challenge with that is some people might be responders and some people might be non-responders. And obviously, because of COVID, it may be challenges to recruit enough people.
Yeah.
But at least with this protocol, you'll be able to tell if you respond better for sure.
Yeah.
And that progression from your first intensity to your third, that would be interesting to know. Are you thinking you do maybe 5 intervals of 400, or what do you think the protocol would be?
Yeah, see, I'm thinking 10, but I don't know if I'm biting off more than I can chew. But I think 10 will give me a really good sample size. If I do 3 days of those, I'm getting 30 intervals in to look at.
Right. The greater that sample size, the better.
Yeah, that's why I figured 10 would be doable. I'm very interested to get out there and see what it's going to be like. And I'm hoping, Dave, you can help maybe document this on a video, and we can kind of put it all together. And Alex, we thought about maybe you kind of doing that with your skiing and seeing what your interval training would be with your skiing. And maybe Dave, on your 80-20 training, you could do that. And my buddy Luciano, who I work with at work, he's a cyclist, so he's kind of showed some interest in doing the creatine experiment as well. So it'd be great to see it through a different number of athletes doing different sports to see what the improvements are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the great part about this is it's supposed to help us benefit our endurance efforts later down the road because of the physiological adaptations, right? So usually, Alex, we talked about this in the past, you get increased mitochondrial density, increased capillary density as well to help oxygen, right? And your body becomes more efficient at using oxygen and burning fuel, right?
Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to see the benefit that the creatine causes. And would it translate over a long period of time? Is it worth incorporating in each high intensity training session so that all of your future races are important? And perhaps for any shorter distance racing you might do, could also be beneficial in that lead up. For example, for track runners doing anything less than 3,000 meters, so maybe your 400 to 3K guys, it might be useful.
Absolutely.
Or in your intensity training for 5-10 marathon guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So any questions from the field?
Do you know foods high in creatine phosphate?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. And so we looked up real quickly because you asked me. I didn't know any off the top of my head. So it appears that beef, salmon, those types of meats will kind of have higher levels of creatine in them. So Dave, you might find this interesting because you're a plant-based vegan, and the studies had shown that vegans actually show the greatest improvements when they're doing this type of training, because the creatine's not there in the diet, right? So you have a bigger capacity for improvement. So it would be really neat to get you on this and to try it. And I think if you do it with your interval, like I know you're running Maffetone, right? But if you're doing 80-20 and you are throwing some track work in there, it could help you. So it'd be great to see what your improvements are over time as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'll certainly fit that into my schedule. Just don't know exactly when,
Of course.
but definitely want to put that in, because I think it would be great to see what the results would be when you kind of mix in the whole 80-20. And, again, being plant powered, I mean, if I can gain much faster, then sure, let's try it. Let's see what happens, right? I'm game.
Absolutely. And that's that. You know what, guys? That's pretty much all I have this week on this article. If there's anything else you guys would like to add, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
I am awesome. I'm on board. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and certainly looking forward to seeing how it all works out for you, Shawn.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
You're the first, man. You're the first.
That's right. I'll be the yellow canary, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
awesome.
yeah, for anybody who's watching this, if you want to check out more about Trail Tales ARP, you can go to the website trailtalesarp.com. We now have this YouTube channel, and you can get our podcast from the website or on Apple, Spotify, anywhere that delivers podcasts. You can pretty much get it from. We've talked about the Creatine Experiment. David has the Plant Powered Runner on YouTube, talking all about his math training. Dave's also my co-host on the podcast, and we were able to get our schedules together. We do shows together, which is great. And then Alex Maycock has been on the show as well, and Alex writes articles for us on the website. And Alex has his own YouTube channel. Just search Alexander Maycock and you'll find his stuff there, all about cross-country skiing. And Alex, you just recently did an interview with a Norwegian cross-country skier. Has he been recruited by Nipissing, or what's the deal with that?
So I met him at the 2019 World Student Games in Russia.
Okay.
And so he lives and trains in Norway. He
Awesome.
finished his undergrad and is beginning a master's program there.
Awesome. I'm about just over a third of the way through the interview there, so I'm gonna probably finish that off tonight while the kids are sleeping and I got time. So
cool. Yeah, maybe you guys will want to incorporate some cross-country skiing into your winter training.
You know what?
In Shelburne, you guys get lots of snow.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And you know what I would love to do one time, Alex? I know you said you're going away to North Bay for the winter, but it would be so much fun to do kind of like a sprint where you can we'll do a little bit of a race, you on your skis and me on my feet, and we'll just kind of go and see what I think I might need a head start though. We'll have to give myself a handicap. But that would be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun.
For sure.
Man. Just do a short distance or something.
100
All right,
meters.
guys. Yeah, so we'll sign off now, and we'll get in touch real soon. And Alex, looking forward to your next article too, whenever you're ready, my man.
Sounds good. Thanks, Shawn.
Hey, Shawn, are we gonna take it out on a 1, 2, 3 note here?
All right, I'll let you you lead this off. You know what's coming, Alex?
You bet.
All right.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining. And with that, get out and run
wild.